Welcome back to Narrative Network. What happens when a police officer's snap judgment leads to a confrontation that changes everything? This is the powerful story of Officer Mark Stevens, a man who believed he was just doing his job, and Terrence Miller, a calm and confident lawyer who wasn't afraid to stand his ground. What starts as an act of bias turns into an unexpected journey of redemption, understanding, and change that leaves an entire community transformed. Stay until the end to witness how a single encounter led to a movement that reshaped lives and proved that even the most unlikely people can come together to make a difference. What would you do in their shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Let's dive in. In the bustling city of Crestwood, Officer Mark Stevens was known for his authoritative demeanor. Some admired his dedication to law enforcement, but others viewed him as harsh and unyielding, particularly toward the Black community. His colleagues often turned a blind eye to his behavior, dismissing it as part of the job. One sunny afternoon, Mark was on patrol in a predominantly Black neighborhood. He noticed a man, tall and well-dressed, walking down the street with a briefcase. Something about the man's calm, confident stride irritated Mark. Without any clear reason, he decided to approach. "Hey," Mark called out, stepping out of his cruiser. "What are you doing here?" The man turned, his expression calm but questioning. "Walking," he said evenly. "Is there a problem, officer?" Mark's tone sharpened. "This isn't your usual neighborhood, is it? Let's see some ID." The man sighed, clearly used to such interactions, and pulled out his wallet. "My name is Terrence Miller. Here's my ID. Now, may I ask why you're stopping me?" Mark barely glanced at the ID before launching into a series of questions. "What's in the briefcase? Drugs? Stolen goods?" Terrence's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "It's paperwork for a meeting. I'm an attorney." Mark scoffed, unwilling to back down. "An attorney? Sure you are. Open the case." Terrence hesitated. "Officer, with all due respect, you have no reason to suspect me of anything. I know my rights." Mark stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." As the tension escalated, a young woman approached, her phone in hand. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, clearly recording the encounter. Mark turned to her, irritated. "Stay out of this." Terrence, however, seized the moment. "Actually, her presence might be helpful. Officer, I'd like to remind you that I have every right to walk down this street without being harassed." The woman added, "He's right, you know. You're way out of line." Feeling cornered but unwilling to admit defeat, Mark finally allowed Terrence to go. "Fine, but don't let me catch you loitering around here again." Terrence shook his head, his calm demeanor unwavering. "You'll regret this," he said quietly before walking away. Later that evening, Mark returned to the station. He couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. Something about Terrence's confidence unsettled him. Out of curiosity, he decided to run the name through the system. His heart sank as the results appeared on the screen. Terrence Miller was not just an attorney. He was the city's most prominent civil rights lawyer, known for taking on high-profile cases of police misconduct. Before Mark could process this information, his supervisor stormed into the room. "Stevens, my office, now!" Mark followed reluctantly, only to find Terrence sitting calmly across from the captain's desk. The captain's face was grim. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" the captain asked, his voice low and controlled. Mark swallowed hard. I didn't realize." Terrence leaned forward. "You didn't realize because you didn't care to ask. This kind of behavior is exactly why people don't trust the police." Mark shifted uncomfortably, but Terrence wasn't done. You stopped me for no reason. You tried to intimidate me, and you assumed, based on nothing but my skin color, that I was a criminal. That's unacceptable." The encounter led to an internal investigation. While Mark wasn't immediately suspended, he was ordered to undergo sensitivity training and placed under close supervision. The incident also drew public attention, with many calling for accountability. Terrence, however, saw an opportunity to make a broader impact. He requested to meet with Mark privately, a move that surprised both the officer and the department. "Why would you want to talk to him?" the captain asked. "Because change doesn't happen from punishment alone," Terrence replied. "It happens through understanding." In a quiet room at the station, Terrence and Mark sat across from each other. The tension was palpable, but Terrence's tone was calm. "Do you know what it's like to be judged before you've even spoken a word?" Terrence began. "To have people assume the worst about you because of the color of your skin?" Mark looked down, struggling to respond. "I didn't file a formal complaint against you because I want something more than discipline," Terrence continued. "I want you to understand the impact of your actions. Every time you profile someone, you're reinforcing a system of distrust and fear, and that hurts everyone, including good officers who want to make a difference." Mark finally spoke, his voice quiet. "I've never thought about it that way." "That's the problem," Terrence said. "You haven't had to think about it, but now you do. What will you do with that knowledge?" The conversation marked a turning point for Mark. For the first time, he began to reflect on his behavior and the biases that had shaped his actions. He enrolled in additional training programs and started attending community meetings to rebuild trust with the neighborhoods he served. Terrence, true to his word, worked alongside the department to implement reforms. He facilitated workshops on implicit bias, ensuring that officers like Mark had the tools to recognize and challenge their prejudices. Over time, Mark became an advocate for change within the force. He spoke openly about his mistakes, using his experience as a lesson for others. "I used to think I was just doing my job," he admitted during a community event, "but I wasn't listening. I wasn't seeing people for who they are. That changes now." Mark and Terrence's unlikely collaboration led to meaningful progress in Crestwood. The police department established new policies to address racial profiling and foster transparency. Community members, once wary of law enforcement, began to see signs of improvement. For Mark, the journey was personal. He built relationships with the neighborhoods he once patrolled with suspicion, learning their stories and earning their trust. As for Terrence, he continued his work as a civil rights lawyer, but he often reflected on his encounter with Mark. It reminded him that even those who seem beyond redemption can change if given the chance. Mark and Terrence's partnership became a symbol of hope, not just in Crestwood, but in neighboring cities grappling with similar challenges. They were invited to speak at conferences, community events, and police academies, sharing their journey of conflict, understanding, and reform. During one such event, Mark addressed a room full of young cadets. "I made mistakes," he said candidly. "I thought enforcing the law meant assuming the worst about people. But the law isn't about power, it's about justice. And justice starts with seeing people for who they are, not who we assume them to be." Terrence followed, emphasizing the importance of accountability. "We can't ignore the biases that exist in society, and we can't pretend they don't influence our actions. Change begins when we acknowledge those biases and commit to doing better." The audience responded with a standing ovation, inspired by their honesty and determination. To further strengthen community ties, Terrence and Mark co-founded an initiative called Bridging the Gap, a program designed to foster dialogue between law enforcement and the communities they serve. The initiative hosted events where officers and residents could share their perspectives, build trust, and collaborate on solutions to systemic issues. At one event, A young boy raised his hand and asked Mark, "Why did you treat people differently before?" Mark knelt to the boy's level and said, "Because I didn't understand, but now I know better, and I'm working every day to make up for it." Terrence smiled, proud of the progress Mark had made. "It's never too late to learn," he told the boy. "And when you grow up, you can help others learn too." The success of Bridging the Gap inspired Crestwood's police department to implement structural changes. Policies were introduced to ensure accountability, such as body cameras, regular implicit bias training, and community oversight committees. Mark played a key role in training new officers, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and a roadmap for change. "It's not just about following orders," he told them. "It's about being human and treating others with dignity." Terrence, meanwhile, used his legal expertise to advocate for statewide reforms, pushing for fair policing practices and greater protections for marginalized communities. For Mark, the transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He spent time reflecting on the values he wanted to uphold, both as an officer and as a member of his community. He joined a mentorship program, guiding young people who were at risk of falling into cycles of crime or distrust of authority. One of his mentees, Jamal, was a bright but troubled teenager. At first, Jamal resisted Mark's efforts, skeptical of his intentions. But over time, Mark's consistency and genuine care broke through Jamal's defenses. "You're not like the cops I've met before," Jamal said one day. "I wasn't always like this," Mark admitted, "but I've learned, and I want to help you avoid the mistakes I made." Jamal eventually turned his life around, crediting Mark and Terrence for showing him a different path. The changes in Crestwood began to ripple outward. Neighboring cities adopted similar initiatives, inspired by the results of Bridging the Gap. Police departments began working with community leaders to address issues of bias and build trust. Terrence's influence grew as he became a prominent voice for justice reform on a national level. Despite his busy schedule, he never forgot the city where it all started. He often returned to Crestwood, where he and Mark continued their work together. Years later, Mark and Terrence were invited to a graduation ceremony at Crestwood's Police Academy. Among the graduates was Jamal, now a young officer determined to make a difference. As Jamal received his badge, he looked at Mark and Terrence in the audience and gave them a small salute. After the ceremony, he approached them and said, "You showed me what real leadership looks like. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." Mark and Terrence exchanged proud smiles. "You're going to do great things," Mark said. With the overwhelming success of Bridging the Gap and its ripple effects across the region, Mark and Terrence realized there was more work to be done. The systemic issues they had confronted in Crestwood were mirrored in cities nationwide, and they felt compelled to take their initiative to a broader stage. They founded the Unity Alliance, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to reforming law enforcement practices, promoting community engagement, and educating officers and citizens on implicit bias and conflict resolution. The organization's mission was clear: to create safer, more compassionate communities through mutual respect and understanding. Mark took on the role of director of training programs, traveling to police academies across the country to share his story and provide practical guidance for officers. Terrence, as the public face of the organization, worked on legislative reform, lobbying for policies that would ensure accountability and equity in law enforcement. Not everyone embraced the changes the Unity Alliance proposed. Some law enforcement officials resisted the idea of reform, seeing it as a critique of their authority. Mark faced tough questions during his training sessions. One officer in training asked him bluntly, "Why should we change what we're doing if it works for us? Isn't this just catering to public opinion?" Mark paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because our job isn't just to enforce laws, it's to protect and serve everyone." If we're not earning the trust of the communities we serve, we're failing. Reform isn't about weakening law enforcement. It's about strengthening it through respect and fairness. Terrence echoed this sentiment in his public speeches. Accountability doesn't make law enforcement weaker. It makes it stronger. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship, and that includes the relationship between police and the communities they serve. Despite their successes, the journey wasn't without its struggles. Mark often grappled with guilt over his past actions, particularly the pivotal encounter with Terrence that had changed his life. He sometimes doubted whether he truly deserved to be seen as a champion for reform. Terrence, sensing Mark's turmoil, reassured him, "None of us are defined by our worst moments. What matters is what we do after those moments. You've turned your mistakes into a platform for change. That's what people see." Mark nodded, though the weight of his past remained a humbling reminder of why their work was so important. The Unity Alliance gained national attention when it was featured in a documentary highlighting efforts to bridge divides in law enforcement. The film showcased Mark and Terrence's journey, from their initial confrontation to their ongoing partnership. It also included stories of officers and community members who had been impacted by their work. The documentary was widely praised, sparking conversations across the country about accountability, empathy, and the importance of reform. Mark and Terrence were invited to appear on talk shows, speak at universities, and even consult with government officials on national. As the years went on, Mark and Terrence's work inspired a new generation of leaders, young people who had grown up in the neighborhoods once marked by tension and distrust, now stepped into roles as community advocates, educators, and law enforcement officers. Among them was Jamal, who had risen through the ranks to become a captain in the Crestwood Police Department. He implemented many of the reforms championed by the Unity Alliance, ensuring they became ingrained in the department's culture. During a Unity Alliance summit, Jamal gave a powerful speech. "I stand here today because two men chose to turn conflict into collaboration. They showed me that change is possible, and now it's my responsibility to continue their work." One evening, after a long day of meetings and events, Mark and Terrence sat together on a quiet bench overlooking Crestwood's Central Park. The statue of the handshake, their enduring symbol of unity, gleamed under the streetlights. "Did you ever think we'd come this far?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with awe. Terrence smiled. "I hoped we would. But what matters is that we believed in the possibility of change, and we didn't stop." Mark nodded. "Sometimes I still think about that day, how different things could have been if you hadn't given me a chance. And I think about how different things could have been if you hadn't chosen to take it," Terrence replied. "Redemption is a two-way street." Years later, the Unity Alliance had expanded to every state in the country, becoming a driving force for systemic reform and community healing. Police academies adopted its programs as part of their standard training, and community police dialogue became a nationwide practice. At a ceremony commemorating the 20th anniversary of Bridging the Gap, Mark and Terrence were honored with a Presidential Medal of Freedom for their contributions to justice and reconciliation. As they accepted the award together, Terrence spoke directly to the audience. "This isn't just our story. It's a story of what happens when we listen, when we learn, and when we choose to work together. Change is never easy, but it's always worth it." Mark added, "We're proof that even the hardest hearts can soften, and even the deepest divides can be bridged. The work doesn't stop here. It's up to all of us to carry it forward." Their story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, understanding and unity could pave the way for a better future. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more thought-provoking and impactful stories. Share this video with your friends and family to spread the message of understanding and change. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.